you doing today? My name is Jalen Sanders, and this is The Vault, where we answer hard questions with honest, truthful, and transparent answers. Today's guest is a very beloved friend of mine, also valued colleague and peer. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Carli. I am 26. I am a Baltimore native and a first-time mom.
Okay, Carli. So, thank you. This is episode 1 of a new series that we like to do. The purpose of this is to provide a background look into a little bit of your professional and personal life to kind of set an example for those out there who may be going through similar situations or have had similar experiences such as yourself. One thing I see is that a lot of the motivational videos or a lot of the interviews that we get out here now seldom give you a behind the scenes taste of what's going on. They just tell you work hard, put in hours, sacrifice, you lose friends, you lose money, but it's no real detailed roadmap of how you got where you got, what you're doing now, and how you plan to be a role model or an example to others. So, yeah, Carli, I heard that you are enrolled in law school.
Yes, so I am a 3L. I'll be graduating in December. I'm basically done at this point. I am an extended or untraditional 3L because your 3 years is supposed to be 6 semesters. My 6 semesters was dragged over an extra semester because I had to take off 1 semester because I gave birth to my son.
So, all right, we're going to get to that part later. So what has your experience in law school been like so far? Like, if you could take me through a bit of a journey from year 1 to 3, what would you say it's been like?
It's been difficult. Being a type A personality, having everything I do has to be perfect, everything has to be organized personality, then to get into law school and to realize that everything that you thought was supposed to prepare you for this point does not.
Everything you did to this point didn't prepare you.
So in undergrad, I was a jurisprudence and community studies and civic engagement minor. Jurisprudence is supposed to give you all sides of the law. You get the theoretical, even the actual legal aspects of the law in jurisprudence. And then I always knew that I wanted to do some type of nonprofit work, so that's why I did the community studies and civic engagement minor. And then I thought, I'm a Greek writer, I'm getting A's in all my classes, and then you get the law school.
I can argue a little bit what Dolph said. She liked to argue, so you did what? Sent to the law school. There we go.
So I got to law school, and law school broke me down piece by piece. I threw an arm over there, a leg over there, and I didn't realize it, but of course, towards now that I'm at the end, I feel like it's built me up into this great mind where I see things differently, I analyze things differently. However, in the beginning, you're not looking at it like that. Like, law school was stressful to the point it started to make me sick.
Now let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because you hear that story often. Oh, it breaks me down. It was difficult. It's like, in what way? What happened to you? Was it you felt incompetent studying? Was it that the workload was too hard? What do you think was the breakdown that occurred? I want you to get specific.
It's a different type of workload. So in law school, there's no homework assignments per se, whereas undergrad, you do these mini assignments and at the end, you have a grade. Mm-hmm. You do these mini assignments accompanied by a midterm and a final, you have a grade. In law school, it's, for some professors, just the final. So 100% of your grade is based on this 1 3-hour exam.
You're telling me for 2 to 3 odd months, you're just in class, reading, answering questions, very repetitive, and then on one day, they said, we're going to give you an exam, we're going to test everything you learned in these past 3 months.
Right. So generally, in most of the classes, it's a midterm and a final, but you have those professors who I don't really believe in midterms, so all we're doing is a final.
So one thing that's really interesting to me is law school was this really like breaking down, building up process? It sounds like it took a lot away from you. So, I mean, you as a student at your law school, do you feel like you were valued? Do you feel like you were kind of protected, like your needs and stuff were put first despite the sacrifices that you were making?
Because I came into law school in a program that was centered around minorities, I feel like I had a family. I created a family in law school for myself. However, if I didn't have that security from that program coming in, I do not think I would have felt as valued as I did going through the process, because I don't think I've experienced, like, just to be frank, racism until I started law school. I didn't experience, like, outright in my face sexism until I came to law school.
You went to undergrad at a PWI and your law school is a PWI, so you didn't experience any of that beforehand. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So everybody kind of like know at the PWI that I attended, the culture was different at the undergrad versus the law school.
So then what was the culture at the undergrad?
The undergrad, there was, to be honest, it was a melting pot. Yes, it was a PWI, but it was a melting pot. There was people from everywhere that went to the undergrad, and everybody was a little more accepting at the undergrad, but it was known that across the street, they say some things that may rub you the wrong way. And because it is a law school, a lot of things are swept under the rug.
Okay, so, on this platform, what we do is I like giving examples. I don't like just talking about hollow experiences. Touch base on that. What was one of the instances where it was like a blatant act of racism, kind of like in your face? Because, again, it's a environment of like higher education, higher learning. Like, you guys are learning skills that will eventually change people's lives. What was like a concrete example? Because I think a lot of people hear racism and they be like, oh, did somebody call you the N-word to your face? Or like, did they say a derogatory statement? Like, what was the example of a setting where you experienced that in the classroom?
It started in our constitutional law class where they talked about affirmative action. And everybody generally know that affirmative action is one of those topics where it can either go left or it's going to go right. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to go left. And one of the students suggested that affirmative action was reverse racism.
Okay, so for those who don't know, affirmative action is basically a program or structure put in place that affords minorities, primarily African Americans, access to certain institutions that, like, we're not the majority. We don't have a high population or high numbers. It gives us kind of like a leg up in the system, but in a positive way, not like a handout, but it's like it's providing me with the same opportunities as, let's say, a white student or a student of another favored minority.
And I'll counter that and say, to be honest, to this day, white women have benefited more from affirmative action than black women, but that's another conversation for another day. So, and the person that made the statement was a white woman. And because we're in the age of, oh, you said something problematic, I'm going to go and look into your background. People started looking through her social media accounts, and a lot of racist comments was posted on her Twitter account.
Like what?
Oh, I don't understand why you're driving so slow with this Obama sticker on. We know you're not going to work. I can tell a lot of her posts were geared towards black people who voted for Obama or benefited from government assistance.
Okay.
So from there, then it started to be like, oh, she would make comments in the school. My woes are because of these N-words. I don't understand why they're so mad. I'm calling them what they are, and use the word again. And I watched how she then played victim, and the professors covered her. They sheltered her. In law school, it's a big thing. If you have a class 2 days a week, you get 5 absences for the semester. That's it. unless you get disability accommodations, and maybe they'll extend your absences a little bit more. I seen how professors was letting her go weeks without coming to class because she didn't want to face her colleagues. Right.
That she created for herself.
Right.
For comments.
To the point her mother, this is an adult we're talking about, her mother came to the law school and threatened to sue the entire institution because her daughter made racist remarks.
It sounds like entitlement to me. Sounds like entitlement. I mean, granted, you have First Amendment freedom of speech, but hate speech is unprotected speech. Another video for another time. But with all that going on, and you're already saying that this is a very harrowing process with all the workload that you have, just the intensity of the courses. Have you ever seen it adversely affect your grades? Or have your grades always been kind of high? Has anything ever happened in regards to your academic status?
Before I started law school, I've never failed a class, never gotten below a B+ in a class. If I get a C on anything, I will have an emotional breakdown. I got smacked in the face when I started law school. I got a C. I failed a class. And the culture, especially at my law school in particular, has been, oh, your grades define who you are as a person. If you're not getting these grades, if you're not the top of your class, then you're not smart. It makes you, that self-doubt starts to set in. Am I meant to be here? Am I equipped to be here? Do I measure up to my peers? That's kind of the culture of law school. It's all about grades, 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 grades. And at the very bottom, network, because you need some type of network in there. So it wasn't until law school that I actually failed a course. And I went to the professor oh, well, I don't understand why I got the grade. And when the response was, well, there was 2 other students who had to retake this course and somebody had to fail. So you were the one who failed. And at that moment, I knew I either have to adapt or I'm not going to make it through, because it was so this is the politics of it and this is the game.
So it became kind of a numbers game.
Right.
Essentially, if you fall on, because I want to paint a picture of everybody. So if you fall on the lower end of the spectrum, it now becomes like the Hunger Games. Okay, this person may have been 2 or 3 spaces ahead of you. This person may be 1 space ahead of you. You might have fell in the middle or fell dead last. Now, some cuts have to be made.
Well, in this context, myself and the 2 other students all had the same grade. She chose, I was the elected. I was tribing, yes.
To be cut. So
right.
It's very disheartening because you pay a lot of money to go to a school like that, especially, again, you're pursuing law. It's very pivotal in our community, especially in politics and everything that's going on nowadays. But you don't hear stuff like that from students. You kind of get glossed over. You get the summa cum laudes, you get the magna cum laudes, you get the 4.0s, you get I was on law review, a law journal, I Carli this class. You get a lot of positive feedback when you hear it, but you don't hear about people's losses. So it's as a student, how do you think you can speak to students who are struggling academically, or what might be going through their mind when they're receiving negative feedback, whether it's on a test, whether it's in an internship, externship, whether or not they didn't pass a class like you? How could you speak to that student and where they are right now?
I think the first thing I'll say is, if you speak to someone and they tell you, oh, just work hard, that's the wrong person. Because law school is literally a game, and you have to learn how to beat the game. I'll also say that it's not going to be easy. And a lot of the times, the successful people are the ones who feel like they lost themselves, because that's what it is. You have to learn yourself, love yourself, go through this whole finding yourself process once you're in law school. It's not easy at all. So if anybody tell you, oh, just read the cases, brief your cases, break them down, that is far from the truth, because that's not how it works. Because they don't talk about The fact that you don't get to see your family. They don't talk about how you miss a lot of important events. They don't talk about how your family start to look at you different because now your mind works differently. And you deal with those family members who now say, oh, well, you think you're better than everyone. Or you don't come around, or we don't see you. And what they feel like is, oh, well, you just don't want to be around us. And that's not it at all. Like, law school is a commitment. And you have to marry law school. You see those people more than you see your family. So they don't talk about the depressed state some people go into. They don't talk about the anxiety. They don't talk about any of those things. It's not until after the fact that if I bring it up, that somebody be like, oh, I dealt with that too. Well, why? Let's bring it out in the forefront to help other people, because to be honest, it's harder for minorities in law school, and whether you're trying to become a doctor, it's hard.
And one thing I will highlight is that, especially on the minority component with Black people, we're going to use specific terms around that, especially with Black people, a lot of our academic foundation prior to law school, it's not that it wasn't adequate, it's not that it wasn't good, it's not that our degree didn't hold as much weight, but it's certain language and terminology that systematically has been used in other forms of privatized education that would expose different people to different words at an earlier age. To make it even simple, I know what a boat is, I know what a tugboat is, I know what a train is. I don't know what a yacht is, I don't know what an express rail is, I don't know what I gotta catch the line, a line system is. It's different kinds of words defined by different things that I may have never encountered before I go to school. So not only am I reading these heavy cases and this heavy case law, I now have to double back to make sure I understand what specific words they're using in specific instances. So with that, what do you wish you would have known before signing a dotted line and agreeing to go to law school?
That generational trauma is real, and that law school was going to trigger things that didn't directly happen to me, that it was going to trigger me in a way. You read these cases and you realize that the founders of this great world that everyone loves so much never had me in mind when they created these laws. They never had my dad in mind when they implemented these laws. So I didn't realize that I was going to be triggered by a lot of the things that I was going to learn.
What's one thing you would change about your experience if you could change anything? Like just one thing, not a million, but just one. I want you to be intentional about this answer.
If I had to change one thing, nothing.
You wouldn't change anything about your experience?
No.
You wouldn't change anything about the law school experience in general, like anything for students, anything for yourself, anything for professors?
Of course, I would have wanted to know what I was about to walk into as far as the dynamic with the professors and the other students. But to be honest, I don't think I would have appreciated the journey if I try to change something.
Pivotal point for you in which you had to make a very adult decision. And I'm referencing my beloved godson, your ball of love and joy, Carson. So could you walk us through the initial stages of what happened surrounding his situation while you were in school?
I've always dealt with health issues, especially with asthma. I have really, really, really bad asthma. It wasn't until my 1L year that I felt like, which now looking back, I realized that it was the stress of law school that was making me sicker than I already was. But I got real sick, and winter break of 1L year, I took a trip, and while on that trip, I don't know how you want me to phrase this. My womanly popped up, and she never left.
So now you just say your period came.
Yes, I had my period, and it didn't go away. And I didn't understand what was going on. The time and it was abnormal. I already had an abnormal period, but it was different than it normally was. And because of the time difference, I didn't call home and I didn't know what was going on. And I was just like, oh, maybe it'll pass. I'll be okay. But after month 3 and going back and forth to the doctors, I knew something was wrong. Mm-hmm. And then month 4 came, and month 5, and month 6. And we had to figure something out.
So what was like ultimately, you're waiting all this time, your menstrual cycle is not going away, like your health is deteriorating. What was the answer, the conclusion that was like drawn when they finally did find out what the issue was?
So I had to have a procedure done where basically they just kind of go in to see exactly what could be going on.
What is it called?
They basically did an endoscopy. So they went in through my belly button to just try to figure out what was going on. Because I did get a ultrasound and an x-ray done, and they seen that I had cysts and fibroids.
Now, what is a cyst and a fibroid? It goes like...
So basically, you can call them like non-cancerous tumors that kind of form. And to be honest, our bodies naturally form tumors. It's just that in the process, they're supposed to go away. They're not supposed to stay. Mm-hmm. In my case, they were there. When I got the ultrasound done, the doctor in the emergency room came in, and the first question to me was, do you want to have children? And my heart dropped. Because at 23 and a half, 24, that wasn't a question that I was expecting to have to answer. My grandmother always say, you tell God your plan and he's going to laugh. Because I used to say, oh, I have so many siblings. I don't want kids. I don't want kids. I don't want kids. But that type A personality kicked in. Oh, I can't? Oh, I want one now.
Right. So you saying on top of, now you're in your second year of law school?
Going into second year of law school.
Going into second year of law school, you have all these emotional experiences, things change it, and then boom, you kind of find out like, it's do or die time. Right. Whether or not I can have a child or not. So can you walk me through that process of what you were thinking when you made the decision to go through and be like, okay, I'm going to have a child despite the situation that I'm in now?
So I was formally diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis, which endometriosis is basically when the uterine lining, which is supposed to be in the inside, starts to grow on the outside. And it grows so bad that when it's a woman's time for her menstrual to come, everything is shedding. So your uterine lining sheds, and what has built on the outside has started to shed as well. So not to get so graphic, but the bleeding is 10 times worse. You get pains. And I was at the stage where they told me that I couldn't have children at all.
Because to kind of break it down, I'm not necessarily scientific, but it's like, I know the egg attaches to the uterus, and if everything's shedding, then the egg can't attach because it's going to get just pushed out.
Right. I was advised to go to a fertility clinic, and I got there, and they was like, yeah, so you can't have kids. They ran some like minor tests there too. Oh, you can't have children. So at that point, it was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I love my aunt to death because she was like, I'll carry for you. Because they had already told me that I needed to have a hysterectomy.
So what is a complete hysterectomy?
So a complete hysterectomy means that all of my entire reproductive system would have been removed. My cervix, my uterus, my ovaries, my fallopian tubes, gone.
So like nothing.
Nothing. My aunt said that she would be my surrogate. So I had to go through testing first before we can even get to that part, because they also test your eggs to see if your eggs are even viable enough to sustain the IVF process in order to even transfer into her. So I went through all of these tests, and then to find out like, oh, well, one of my tubes wasn't working the best either. So now I'm like, all of these years I've been dealing with severe menstrual pain, and it's just like, oh, you just have bad cramps, you're fine. And that wasn't the case at all.
And your story is very familiar to a lot of women in America because I believe the statistic is about 5 million women nationwide deal with this, but it could be even more because a lot of doctors, when you go to the doctor and you tell them about pain and discomfort and problems with your menstrual cycle, it's kind of written off, especially with black women. It kind of gets written off. They give you some Motrin, some Tylenol, something like, oh, you'll be fine. It's just growing pains, but really it's a festering problem that's occurring from when you're younger and you're just letting it build up until your adulthood. And these are like your prime reproductive years.
Correct. So what I will say is, if I had to tell anybody, any woman, anything, force your doctors to test you. And if they say, oh, you're too young to be impacted by this, you tell them, write it in my chart that you said I'm too young and that you refuse to do it, so that if anything does happen and they come back, you have that documented. Because to be honest, that was a lot of my experience of, oh, well, you're too young, so we're just going to give you this. When I say because of the pain have been so severe, I've taken 5 different medicines, which at this point I'm probably a pro, because what they don't know is depression medicine, if you take it at such a low dose, is used as pain medicine.
Wow. That's a fun
So I was taking a mocktail of different medicines because they were like, oh, this should help with the pain. Nothing helped with the pain. So fast forward, I went through the fertility process, and then I had to, unfortunately, go through the book to find a sperm donor, because I was in a relationship and then my partner was hesitant, and because I'm not married and I grew up very religious, I come from a family full of pastors and ministers and preachers, so it was very untraditional for me, because my plan was to get married first and then have children. So when it was brought up to my partner, he decided that that wasn't the route that he really wanted to take. He was hesitant about it, and I take hesitation as your sign of a no, because having a child is a huge commitment. That's a lifelong commitment. And if I'm going to voluntarily make myself a parent, and I had to voluntarily make myself a single parent, I'd rather be single and know that the village around me would be filled with men that would give my son everything that he needs to be a great black man, than for him to deal with the trauma of feeling like you didn't want me.
So that's very powerful, and you have the right mindset thinking, because you get into these stereotypical situations, especially in nowadays 2021, the alpha sphere, or like red pill talk, where a lot of curators on social media feel the need to talk about the worth of black women and what you don't need to be dealing with single mothers, or just overall what they think about your situation, and they couldn't even scratch the surface of your situation to make a voluntary decision. Because it still stems from stereotypes with our parents. They believe that, oh, Brenda's got a baby. You see her out on the street. She obviously was irresponsible. However, you took the time and you were strategic about how you wanted to have your son. So amidst all this, COVID happens. So it's like, not only are you in law school, you're dealing with the struggles of deciding like parenthood and motherhood, and then COVID hits. So could you walk me around like what happens after you make the decision to, like, matter of fact, leading up to the decision of you deciding to have Carson?
I feel like everything happens for a reason, even though I feel like this should have happened almost $1,000 before I made the decision. Someone that I dealt with in my past came back around. And he knew of my situation, knew what was going on, and now looking back on it, probably tried to take advantage of it, but agreed to basically be a donor. So fast forward, end up pregnant, and COVID hits. COVID hit approximately 3 weeks after I found out I was pregnant. And we were still in school when I found out. And that transition was hard for me because I found out I was pregnant and the very next week I got sick. And I was sick as a dog.
So when you say sick, like, describe how sick you were.
When people want to call morning sickness, I had the finisher type of morning sickness. So bad that I was diagnosed with hyperemesis. So what people don't know is that hyperemesis is supposed to be severe morning sickness. For some people, after your first trimester, which is like your first 3 months of pregnancy, your morning sickness should subside and end. Mine didn't.
So it's just ongoing. Like,
I had morning sickness from the day I found out to the day I gave birth.
So that's like you couldn't keep anything down, like
right. So my morning sickness was so bad that I lost 30 pounds.
Sheesh.
I lost 30 pounds. I couldn't even drink water because it would come up. So it ended up getting so bad that they put a PICC line in my arm, which is like a temporary permanent port. So a nurse would come to my house and put an IV bag in so that I could get fluids because I couldn't keep anything down. So COVID hit, and I was blessed that everything went virtual for school because to be honest, I don't know how much more of my spring semester I would have been able to finish out if we had to stay in person.
So at this point, you transitioned to remote, being in school remote, because like when the world shut down, they shifted all classes to online. So just, kind of wrapping up the timeline of things, mid to end of your second year, you find out about your diagnosis. You still have everything going on with law school. You then make the decision to be a mother. After careful planning and thinking, COVID hits, and now you're online. So it's like, what was that transition like? Like, how did you deal with schoolwork, and then you're pregnant with morning sickness and you can't eat? Like, what happened amidst all that stuff?
I literally laid in a bed and did everything. I had books in one corner and tissues in another. And when it was time for my class to start, I would open my laptop, get my pen, and try to get as many of them notes down as I possibly could. And then if I knew that I wasn't as focused, I would then have to go back and rewatch the class just so that I could grasp the concept. I think the biggest blessing of the first semester of remote for law school was that they decided to give us credit or no credit, which basically meant you had to not take the final to fail the class, to not get the credit for the class.
It's basically like, as long as you do all your work, you good.
Right. So as long as you did something, you got your credit.
And that's crazy because I remember during that time period, some people were actually, and I understand it's cost benefits. Sometimes grades can open up the door for you for like higher opportunities and stuff, but it was insane to me. Like, it was that much of the Hunger Games. Some people were genuinely arguing down that with a change in the environment, you can no longer study in school. You're in your basement or in your parents' house. And they wanted us to still get graded as heavily and as severely as if we were still in school the entire time.
Correct. I took all of my finals except one because I ended up getting so sick that I was admitted into the hospital for almost 3 weeks. So I had to contact people at the school and go through the whole process of that. And eventually I was able to take that final once I got discharged and came back home. So originally my plan was I'm going to go through the fertility process, get pregnant, do my spring semester, do some summer classes to offset the amount of classes that I planned to take in the fall. I knew because my original due date was the end of October. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. That'll give me some time because I'll basically almost get to the end of the semester, have my son, I'll save all my absences up. Oh, I had this all planned out. It was the biggest joke ever.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I'll save all my absences. I'll use those absences. I also get disability accommodation. I'll use that too. And it'll get me all the way to finals. And I just come sit for my finals and be done. Didn't happen like that at all. They sent me a letter and said I was going to take a leave of absence for the fall. I appreciate her now, but one of the ladies in the student affairs office was like, you already been sick. At this point, you've been admitted into the hospital 3 times for weeks at a time. You can't. It's impossible. As much as you want to, you got to choose yourself. And then my mother had a real genuine conversation with me and said, if something was to happen to you today, they're going to fill your space. Nobody's going to care that, but she's pushed and she strived so hard to get through law school pregnant. They're going to say, feel bad for her. Maybe even send us some flowers. An email or two. And you're going to be just a distant memory in everybody's head. That school is not going to care that you lost your life trying to be an overachiever. They're not going to care. They're not going to name a hallway in the building after you. It's not going to happen. And at that moment, I had to choose myself because the doctor had a real conversation with me and said, at the rate it's going, it's either you're going to have to choose yourself or your child. And because you're not that far along, we're going to choose you over your child.
Yeah, man, that's very powerful because, I mean, even in the work world today, we're seeing just a shift with a lot of major corporations, a lot of business entities. The self-sacrifice that people have been making for years, they have very little to show for it. And at the end of the day, these companies, these schools, these businesses, not to say that they aren't beneficial to society, but it's us or you. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to choose themselves. Right. And your loved ones are always going to choose you and what's in your best interest and your best favor. So you are literally Superwoman. And it shouldn't have to be that way, but you are Superwoman. From your strategy, your planning, to the execution, to having a beautiful baby boy who is going to be loved and poured into by everyone in this community. So I just want to say I commend you, and I understand how hard it is, and the decisions that you've had to make.
Thank you.
Kind of getting a little bit more intimate and stuff like that with the donor situation. How is that for you? Because I know that's also another conversation that kind of gets glossed over, or like nobody really pays attention to outside of, baby mama drama or the baby father, like I got trapped. So like, what has that been like for you?
So I went against my better judgment, and because I knew him and I thought we had somewhat of a better relationship, I put him down on the birth certificate. This was against the doctors at the fertility place saying don't do it. This was against my inner discernment saying don't do it. I did it. And it wasn't until after Carson was born, and this is to say that Carson was born almost 2 months early. Mm-hmm. So that was a whole process in itself. And I needed to, my only requirement for anybody was, if you want to come here, I need you to get a COVID test. My only requirement. He didn't feel like he needed to get a COVID test.
So again, just highlighting the timeline of the situation. Donor happens, we're in the middle of COVID, your son is born. You don't really need, I mean, was it like, did you rely on him for finances or anything like that? Like,
so no, because going into it, I planned to be Carson's only parent.
So you were 100% financially stable.
Enough to have, yes.
You had a structure put in place, you had goals, you had tentative planning, everything. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I need him. It was kind of like just a transfer of self.
Yes. So towards, just to rewind a little bit, I said before I had really bad asthma. So there's 3 tiers for asthma and pregnancy with women. You have the tier of women who asthma don't change, the tier of women who asthma gets better, and then the ones who asthma gets worse. I happen to be the person who asthma got worse. So I was admitted into the hospital for long term, and I was there almost 3 months. till the end of my pregnancy. I was induced early, had Carson. He was 4 pounds, 13 ounces.
And the structure and everything was put in place, and all you asked the sperm donor to do was, okay, if you want to come see him,
get a COVID test.
Get a COVID test.
Because at this point, I haven't even been around my family because it's COVID.
And the vaccine has ceased to exist.
At this point, the vaccine, there is no. It's a far distant thing. Nobody's even talking about a vaccine. So I have Carson September 11th, and then from there, I come home. But Carson is a preemie. My immune system is shot. Everyone in my house got tested twice before we came home. So that was only my thing. Can you get a COVID test? He didn't want to get a COVID test. Fine. You don't want to get a COVID test? You're not coming. Whatever. Fast forward, I needed to get a passport for Carson. And the decision I made came back to bite me. Because I put him down on the birth certificate. I had to ask him at that point, I need some information from you so that I can get his passport. Which at this point, I had already filed papers to go to court. So he didn't want to, because at this point, he wanted a relationship with me. I didn't want a relationship. I was under the presumption that this was a business transaction, and that was the end of it.
So the business transaction being, you give me your sperm for my child because we're cool, and we leave it at that. You don't have to come out of pocket for anything.
Right.
You don't have to do, it's nothing. And
right.
If you want to see him, all you got to do is get a COVID test.
Right.
I got you, bro.
That was it. Carson has my last name. There's no ties to him whatsoever. End up going to court. And I think this was the first time that I actually had to turn into like attorney by doom and represent myself. And so in the end, I have legal custody of Carson. I am Carson's parent. According to the state of Maryland, according to the United States, I'm Carson's parent. I make the decisions for Carson. I handle all business for Carson. So after that was in place, and then he wanted to kind of make things tumultuous, but I even said in court that, I don't want to stop him from seeing him. If he wants to see him, that's fine. And they have like a court-ordered plan for if he wants to see him. Because my whole thing was, even if I never wanted to be an anonymous sperm donor. Because I didn't want to hinder Carson from being able to know where certain things came from. What a lot of people don't realize, when you get these anonymous sperm donors, these kids kind of suffer because when they realize, why do I have this type of attitude? Or why do I have a bump on my hip, but nobody else has it? Or why do I have these certain traits and tendencies? And sometimes it's closure or necessary for the child to then go back and say, okay, this makes sense. And while I knew that when Carson is older, I'll be able to tell him, mommy loved you so much, she wanted you so bad that I went through X, Y, and Z to get you here. And that's why we have this untraditional family. But that doesn't mean that you're not loved. That doesn't mean that you're missing out on anything at all. That's just how God intended for things to be.
So essentially, because we're putting this out there, sometimes people don't pay attention to context.
Right.
And that's why I keep reiterating the timeline.
Right.
You put a structure and plan in place for if his father wanted to be there, he could be there.
Right.
Even before the court case and
right.
you went in custody, before that, you really created a clear path for him. If you want to be in this child's life,
you can.
You can be in this child's life. But correct me if I'm wrong, because it wasn't on his time and in the way in which he wanted to be there, which is being with you, kind of like as a pseudo family, not even a pseudo family, but as a family, he chose violence essentially and was like, I'm not with this.
Correct. So then it wanted to be like, you want to make things hard, and
what were some of the things you did to try and make it hard?
I have set boundaries where you cannot call and text me before a certain time, after a certain time. I think those boundaries force people to respect you. So it would be, you want to call 11 o'clock at night. This is a newborn baby.
he's sleeping. It's nothing for you to check on at 11 o'clock at night. Or, I'm not going to give you my information so he can get a passport. So because you want to be spiteful to me, you want to hinder his opportunity to create memories. And granted, people are going to say, well, he was a baby. Yes, but opportunities are endless, and I want to create those memories with him. Right. So he may be a baby today, but he'll be 10 years old tomorrow, and he wants to travel. Okay. So it was things like that. He didn't even have to see me. All he needed to do was take a picture of his license and send it to me. And it was, I'm not doing that because you won't give me what I want. I'm not going to give you what you want. But what he didn't understand was that's not really hurting me. You're hurting the child.
So you hurt your relationship with your son.
Exactly. So after court, the judge said, well, you don't need to ask him for anything at this point because you handle everything.
So I went and got Carson a passport, and we went to Jamaica and had a ball. Okay. So it just was a little, and now I think about it, it was some narcissism involved. It was all about self.
Do you think anything on your behalf could have been done better or handled better?
I probably should have just, since I paid California Sperm Bank that money, I probably should have just got it from over there and just. But hindsight is 20/20. And what I will say is I wouldn't change things for the world because maybe I wouldn't have had Carson. I wouldn't have this very independent, he's going to tell you what he don't like, what he like. I wouldn't have him. And I wouldn't change anything about him. So I wouldn't change anything in that aspect either. I would take it to the chin like I normally do. Like, okay, whatever.
So, we're at that age. I'm 29. You're 26. Yeah, you is getting up there, bro. It's a lot of our peers between 23 to 30 that are kind of dealing with like these issues of like parenthood and stuff like that. And, our parents, especially in the Black community, make offhand comments. When you gonna give me some grandbabies? When you gonna do this and that? Societal pressures, especially in like some kind of dated medicine, where like 35 could be considered a geriatric pregnancy.
Yes.
Like you're past your prime to have kids. Right. But then you see people like Serena, Beyonce, who have all their ducks in a row, and they can afford to have children at those later stages in life. What would you say to Black women and women in general that are considering motherhood and parenthood at this age, with all the societal pressures and then maybe like a booming career that they have as well? What would you suggest to them, or what would you say to them?
I'll say if having a family is what you want to do it. And the reason that I say that is because you hear so many, especially in the African American community, of, get married, have a career, have children. That wasn't my story. It didn't work out that way for me. I'm blessed enough to say at least I was able to have one. I did have the hysterectomy, so I can't have children again. Yes, I can adopt. There's other ways that I want to have another child. But what I will say is if you don't want to have children, don't feel pressure to have them if that's not what you want to do. And if you do want to have children, don't feel like because your life isn't perfect that you can't do that. Because motherhood has been the most fulfilling relationship journey that I've ever had in my life. And I don't feel bad about the way in which it happened for me. I don't want anybody to feel bad for me. This is just my story, and this is how it had to happen. But what I'll also say is don't ask women when you're going to have children. Don't ask women, are you pregnant? Those are disrespectful comments. Because for somebody like me, I can't have kids anymore. So to ask me that, you don't know if that's a trigger. You don't know what I internally deal with. But also, too, when you ask women like, when are you going to have some children? You don't know what this woman is going through. Like, I have plenty of aunts and say, when you going to get married? When you going to have some kids? Not knowing that I'm battling a serious fertility condition. So I just say, do what you want and do how you want to do it, and it's going to make you happy. Like, just do whatever you want to do so that you can be happy.
Okay. Well, coming towards the end of the discussion. It's been very, heavy, so I'd like to end it on a lighter note. This part of the segment is called WTF. And in this segment, we ask one random question to our interview participant to see if they can answer it. So I would like you to finish a song lyric for me. All right? I'm going to give the beginning part of it, and you give the end part of it. And if you get it correct, you win a prize. You ready? Animal crackers in my soup.
Jalen, I don't know this.
You do. It was a Thomas commercial. It was very known. Animal crackers in my soup. What is the latter half of that lyric? Just imagine yourself, 2 a.m., not supposed to be up watching TV. A commercial comes on. And this song is on that commercial.
I don't remember the words verbatim. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't remember the words.
Unfortunately, she has failed one test. The lyrics were animal crackers in my soup, monkeys and rabbits. Loop-de-loop.
Only, this is not the question that we prepared for.
It's not, but I changed up the game. That's why it's called What the Fuck. And that's it.